Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. I am so excited about today's show because I have two men that I have such admiration for. They're going to get centered in just a moment, but all of us are a little off-centered these days. But I have to tell both Danny Whitman and Robert Bartley, the two powerhouses, individually, but together they create dynamite. Broadway Backwards, and everyone who knows me knows I say this over and over, my favorite night of the year in the theater. Oh. And last year, on March 16th, I had tickets, thanks to our dear friend, Russ Woolley, to go to the one big night of the year that I look forward to, among many. And unfortunately, a little thing called COVID crept into the Broadway community and took us off course. And I want to say to both of you that Broadway Backwards is indirectly responsible for this entire series that I do, because my series began last year with my dear friend, Leslie Ann Warren, who was supposed to be in New York to do Broadway Backwards. And as soon as I heard that she was coming in, I reached out and said, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. Would you be my first guest? And she said yes. And then 2 days later, everything hit the fan. So today marks 411 days since our theaters shut down. And I want to ask you both, first of all, thank you for being here. How are you both doing it really in the midst of this crazy?
Well, first of all, hello. I'm glad to see you, even virtually.
Thank you.
I have lots to talk about with you because I'm a big Dolly fan. So,
okay.
I love your website. I've been following it for years.
Well, thank you, but this is all about you today.
I know. We're doing okay. We have chosen to quarantine. We've done very little outside. I think I've been out 3 times in the year and something. Once to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which was not fun, to get a driver's license fixed, and then getting our vaccine, which we have gotten. But it's been, I don't want to kid ourselves. It's been a rough year. It's been a rough year for the whole theater community in New York, across the country. Mm-hmm. We're all hanging in there, and we're all leaning on each other and supporting each other, both with our friends and our families. And hopefully everybody's doing the same. And we have a child. So we have a kid that's in kindergarten virtually.
Wow.
So mix that with our daily lives and him in class right next to us with a bunch of other kids. It's a complicated recipe, but it's wonderful. We've also used it as a time to kind of get closer and come together.
Well, I was going to say the two of you are sitting so close together. My husband, who's celebrating a birthday today, so shout out to Danny. Also a Danny. This past year, I, honest to God, believe has brought us closer together. And we live in a house in the country in Rockland County. I have not even been in Manhattan since March 10th of last year. So I'm assuming, I could be wrong, that the two of you are in an apartment.
We are. We're at what we call the old actors' home, Manhattan Plaza.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how has the past year shaped the two of you beyond the obvious things that all of us are going through? But what are some of the biggest changes that have happened to both of you as we've gone through this past year?
I'll say, well, first of all, waking up and being able to do our work in the same place every day is really neat. Being able to, when you work out of your home, or when one person works out of the home, you might spend, 6 hours awake together. And we've spent, 18 hours awake together or 16 hours awake together every day. And with our son, who I would have probably seen, get him ready for school 2 hours. And then at night, maybe at 2 hours, I would have seen 4 hours a day. And now we see each other throughout the day. We're working and we're busy and we're doing lots of stuff and juggling his stuff, of course. But we see each other and we interact in between Zoom meetings and various things and homework preparation. That's the best part. It's been a silver lining.
It's enriching our lives, because what I've said to Danny through the whole pandemic is I have a new respect for what he does, because I'm actually listening while I'm doing the dishes. I'm listening to what he's doing at work, and hopefully vice versa. And we are comprehending like more fully what the other person's, life experience is, really.
The same thing has happened for me. Where sometimes, there have been projects that we are literally in the studio together the entire time. And there are other projects where we're not working on it together, or I visit. But now I'm always with a glass to the studio, sometimes in the room, in and out of the room. And I get to see more of his process, which is miraculous.
Mm-hmm. Now, with both of you, which came first, collaboration or the relationship?
The relationship. Communication.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I wonder, how long have you two been together?
God, 22 years.
Oh, you're babies.
how about you guys?
We're going on 31 years. Next month.
Amazing.
Our 10th wedding anniversary, we were one of the first, another long show, but we were one of the first 100 couples to get married in New York when it was legally wed to do so. But we've been together 31 years.
Congratulations!
Wow, we have stories about that too.
We got married. We got married pre-Prop 8 in California, and then when this is a very quick story, but when Prop 8 happened, we didn't know if our marriage license was legal. So I spent hours on the phone with California, and the only way I could get an answer was with the Department of Corrections. They had a marriage bureau of the Department of Corrections in California. So I called them and I said, look, I just need to know, I'm not a criminal, but do you know anything about Prop 8? And the woman said, let me look. She come back, she goes, I got really bad news. You're still married.
That's a funny story, but not funny ha-ha story. I mean, because it could have gone the other way.
Absolutely. It was terrifying. Yeah.
It was a frightening time.
And how did the two of you meet?
Well, we met in the building at the gym downstairs that we live in. And we just started talking one day. He had a very handsome face, and
Still does.
And I started talking to him. We realized we had a lot of friends in common. My friend Fred Vogel, who was a producer in the city, he was working with on a show, Marlena. So we started chatting about that, and then we made a date, and then we tried to both cancel the date, and all of our friends talked us into going on the date.
We both had just been through like enough,
dating,
enough bad first dates and bad 20th dates.
So we went on a date for brunch, and it lasted the entire day.
We actually took a break because he had something to do, and I had a friend that I was seeing, and then we got back together.
Had our second date
that evening.
Good for both of you.
Whoever does that.
No, that's what we did.
All right.
Now, I want to ask you, I mean, people looking at the two of you and the work that you both do, it would give the impression that you would probably live, eat, breathe, sleep theater. You also have a child. How do you put that part of your lives aside so that the focus is on your child and on a relationship and things that don't revolve around the theater?
Well, I'll go first. I have to tell you, it's actually the most refreshing thing to talk about other things, to play Simon Says, or late yesterday, he and I were doing a puzzle while Bob was doing a construction project in the kitchen. Like, it's kind of good to just be normal people and not revolve all around, the pressure of theater and opening and, putting together a show. It's just a good break.
And also we do theater so much that we have some rules in the house, like occasionally we'll listen to a cast album, but we listen to Ella Fitzgerald. We listen to jazz, some disco, some country music, some Hawaiian music, different things that keep us a little bit separate from the theater. Because I don't know about you, Richard, but for us, when we go to a show or a movie, we're constantly analyzing and thinking about the process. So it's great to do relaxing things that aren't involved in the entertainment industry.
So what's the secret for the two of you, if there is a secret? I mean, because obviously, you both are in the profession. You both collaborate a lot together. So even if you do separate it, it's always there as this cloud over your head. How do you make it work with the two of you?
Here we have a rule that if one person feels passionately about something, we do it. So, and sometimes that can just be one person needing to talk about a project we're working on, and the other one's like, I'm tired, I'm whatever. But if somebody feels passionate and it's happening, do it. Don't let it take over our life. Or if we're having, a discussion about something that we might disagree on, if one person is like super passionate about it and the other one's like, I just don't know, let's try it.
Yeah. Also, there's always conflict, out of theater is conflict. All great storytelling is conflict. So out of conflict, sometimes the greatest things arise. So we have to very much separate parenthood, relationship, and work. It has to have some separation, because we can completely disagree with what we're doing in a rehearsal studio vehemently, but we have to come home and feed our son dinner, so
it also just puts everything in perspective. You know what I mean? Like there are two things that we both are most passionate about when making a decision about a show that's going to feel like, oh my God, we're stuck with it forever if we make a mistake, and doing the wrong thing with our son. But doing the wrong thing with our son really definitely, it just has more weight. It just puts it all in perspective. We can try something and Bob will always say the song, we can always come back to the older song, or we can always come back to the character that we cut, or whatever. So,
well, I want to go back for both of you, and I'll start with you, Robert. When the passion began for you as a child, where were you from originally? And if you can tell us a little bit about your growing up. I always like to go back to the 5-year-old self. I think of that 5-year-old as the pure self. It's before school starts, peer pressure, living up to the expectations of teachers and other students in school. So tell us a little bit about the 5-year-old Robert.
Well, I lived in New York, born in New York City, lived in Long Island. My parents, Bob and Jane, used to take me and my sisters to a Broadway show every month. We didn't have a lot of money, but it was...
What is the first Broadway show that you remember seeing?
1776. I remember the wood paneling of that set was gorgeous, and like all the slats of shades that they'd open and close. And I remember I've since done the show, and there's that 45-minute scene where there's no singing. And I remember that being long as a child. But we saw Chicago, we saw Shenandoah several times with John Cullum. We saw just even plays, Absurd Person Singular. They opened our eyes to that. And then for me, childhood in New York was rough as, a young gay boy, a lot of bullying. So I was trying to find my community, my family. And I think it was in high school when my mother suggested I do a play. And so I auditioned for My Fair Lady, was George the bartender, and loved it. And then said, I'll take a class in college and see what happens. And that ended up with me canceling all my classes and just taking theater classes. And that was the end of it. I was done.
Were your parents in the business at all?
No. My dad was a bricklayer. My mom worked at a bank. As far as I can go backwards, I think my grandmother on my father's side sang in like a USO show. But other than that, I I don't think you know that. Other than that, no.
So you can learn things about each other today.
Yeah, I didn't think there was any. That's amazing.
But you said something that's really amazing here, that, trying to find your tribe, your family, the people that you want to belong to. All of us, gay boys and girls, most of us found our safe space in theater, and which is amazing that no matter where we came from, and I'm from South Carolina, that we came through the same ranks. But you said that your mom suggested you going into the theater department. So your parents were open about your being gay?
They didn't know, or they knew and we didn't discuss it until college. But I'm sure they had an inkling. I think when I told her, she said, I've always known. But I think they just saw that I needed an outlet for the energy I had as a kid. And that's where I went into it. Everyone in my family, they were Irish Catholic, have had their own journey with my coming out and how they've had to deal with it. And certainly doing a show like Broadway Backwards, there's no getting around it. I mean, they come to babysit mostly. And then the night of the show, they'll sit in the audience, and my nieces, my nephews, my sisters, and it's on the stage. That's our story, the gay storyline. So they've been educated, as Danny and I have, over the 16 years we've done the show. They've been educated in different parts of gay culture, which were vast.
And the jokes, the off-color jokes,
the off-color jokes
in the show.
Did you have to explain the off-color jokes to them?
No. My mom did say. My mom did say at one point, "You think we're prudes? Your father and I used to go to drag shows in New York," and I'm like, "What?
What?"
I don't know.
Wow. And but what was the defining moment for you where you said, "I am going to have a career in show business"?
Gosh, I've never been asked that. It was in college, and it was probably the first time I failed. The first time I failed in a show, I knew I had to prove to myself that I could do that. And so I went on sort of a wrong path for a while, where I was pursuing theater to prove to myself and to others that I could achieve in the theater, which is not a healthy relationship with the theater.
No.
And then I actually got in a Broadway show, and at one point I just said, I have to leave the show and figure out why I'm doing this, because I'm not happy. And so I quit, went and worked in a community theater in Texas in a concession stand for a summer, and found my passion is story. It's not necessarily theater, it's storytelling. I love story, especially LGBT stories. And that's when I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing all of this. And same questions for you, Danny. Are you originally from New York as well, or?
No, I'm from a town called Hamden, outside of New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
And I grew up, I had a different relationship to music and theater. I got involved young. My brother did plays and musicals, and I just knew I wanted to. He looked like he was having fun, so I did it too. And I remember this moment where the first show was The Sound of Music, and I was cast. My best friend at the time, Damian Hickey, and I auditioned, and we realized we were auditioning for the role of Kurt Von Trapp. And I got it, and he wound up being a Nazi, and he was then on the tech side for the rest of like our school years, and I was on the stage. But more importantly, I realized what we both realized was that we had a place to fit in, and to not feel afraid. And I mean, I was really like at that age, I think I was 11, and those were horrible years, as they are often for many kids, gay or not. Those next 2 years were just like the worst years of my life. And there were times that my mom somehow let me not go to school. I was sick, but I went to play practice after school. And I was doing Babes in Arms, and that was fantastic, but I wasn't going to math class. And music and theater, I played the drums and played the piano. That just got me through those like really difficult years. I had a place where like I belonged, and I felt like I had something worthwhile to share.
And with both of you coming out, something that we talk about and go through. Did it happen within the theater for both of you, where you came out and you felt comfortable being your authentic selves?
Mine, so when I was in high school, I knew I would be coming out, not during high school, but I knew that once I got to college, I would figure out what in the world that all meant. Mm-hmm. I was in a theater program, so that made it much easier. But the like coming out to to people back home, my family, that wasn't any easier. But just being in an environment for me where there were other gay kids was amazing.
And for me, my college was in Texas. There weren't a lot of out people in my theater department when I was a freshman, and I never knew anything was really wrong with it. So I was like, I'm gay. Mm-hmm. And since then, everybody from that department is practically gay now. But, again, this was the 80s in Texas, and things have morphed and changed so beautifully over these decades. Even since we started Backwards, we always say what was more rare is so commonplace now. My nephew in Texas told me one year, when we came out to him, he goes, yeah, there's a guy in my class. He's the captain of the football team, and he's going to prom with this other guy. And I'm like, wait, what? In Texas?
He was 16 at the
time. Yeah. And like
amazing.
Completely comfortable. So it's changed. It's changed a lot, which is a blessing, really.
And was the transition easy for both of you? I know, Danny, Robert, you mentioned that you were in a Broadway show and you had to leave the show in order to truly find yourself. And I want to ask for both of you, transitioning, for lack of a better word, into the Broadway community, was this an easy process for both of you? Or what was the biggest struggle that you both had, either internally or with just getting yourself acclimated?
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but we all have an image of what Hollywood is or Broadway is, and it's never real. It's not really what it is. I always thought of it as a kid as like, it's this club, and you got to get into this club, and everybody loves everybody, and it's a big family. And there is truth to that it is a family, but just because you're in a show doesn't mean you necessarily connect. You don't connect with the other shows unless you do the bowling league or the baseball, softball leagues. And that was one of the things that was really important to me was community. I did a production of Follies in Texas before I moved to back to New York from college. And it was Juliet Prowse and Marilyn May. And Marilyn May was actually rehearsing Dolly down in Galveston. And I used to drive her after the show at night, watch her rehearsal from midnight to 5 a.m. singing the jazz version of Dolly phenomenally. And then we go back, sleep, and do the show. But Juliet Prowse taught me a great lesson of what theater should be. Harvey Evans, another Dolly alum, was in that too. Yeah. He was Buddy. And she would say, darlings, I've rented a bus. We're all going for Indian food tonight. And no one was excluded. The whole company was invited. She embraced everybody as the main star. There were a lot of stars, but the main star of the show. She was like, this is a family. We are together. We're in this together. And I thought, that is remarkable. And I've never been able to stomach when people are excluded in the theater. I think it should be welcoming, and it should be inviting. And that, to me, is what I think Broadway aspires to. And that is one of the reasons I love working with Broadway Cares, because it's like a net that's
and that's the message of Broadway Backwards right there. That's it.
It pulls everybody together and gives, the guy from Mrs. Doubtfire and the girl from Chicago a chance to like work together and be a community, and it's not just LGBT, it's our straight allies, supporters. Everyone comes together and does it. Like Len Cariou, straight as can be, has done this every single year, and he's as much a part of the LGBT community as anyone, and it's a beautiful way of coming together. That to me is what Broadway should be.
Yeah, I have a little of a different answer because I've never performed in the Broadway community. When I was an actor on the road, one of the I was doing a non-union tour, and we had a week off or something or other. We came to New York to see shows, and I saw an appeal for Broadway Cares, and I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. And I went back out on the road, and I called into the office and talked to them. And I said, well, how can I get involved? And they said, well, you can coordinate red bucket appeals on the road. So I did with every show. And two things happened. One is I suddenly felt a part of something. I felt a part of the Broadway community because that's what Broadway did. And even though I was in a regional theater, and it made me feel connected to a part of the industry that I aspired to be a part of, but it also took me out of like the self-absorption that I was immersed in, which was my career as an actor. And that was really special. So in getting back to your question about the Broadway community, I feel privileged to be able to collaborate with the Broadway community in the way that I do at Broadway Cares, and feel so welcomed. But I also understand that's a business that's incredible and gives so many people incredible opportunities, and they work so hard. And I just feel lucky to be surrounded by, friends with, collaborators with, people in the community that are so brilliant and generous and kind.
Yeah, I mean, theater people, as you know, Richard, are the first ones to say yes to everything. They're the ones that always want to do the right thing and help. And
speak up.
It's like Broadway Cares amplifies that voice, which I think is certainly this year more than ever is more needed.
The other night I was watching A Star Is Born, the Judy Garland version on TCM, which I've seen a million times, but a certain line jumped out at me this year in a way that had never resonated before. And that's at the beginning when they're at the Shrine Auditorium and the Tom Noonan character says, boy, I hate benefits. And I'm thinking maybe it's because of the year that we've been through. We do so many benefits, but it's true. We are there. We jump in. We do what needs to be done to bring us all together. I want to ask you. I remember specifically where I was the first time I heard the words Broadway Cares, and I want to know from both of you if you can take us back to that moment when you were first aware of that. Obviously, we all came through that horrible time together, but when you mentioned Danny being on the road. But if you can both take us back to that moment.
I can tell you, it's a very clear moment that I think about a lot. So I'd come off the road to be in New York City for like a week, and I wanted to see as many shows as possible. And I met a friend, and we were at the half price ticket booth, and he said, well, let me just go and see what this thing is at the Palace, speaking of Judy. It was the Will Rogers Follies, which was, I think in previews at the time, and some guy came over and gave him free tickets. His wife got sick, and so we had 6 aisle orchestra seats for the Will Rogers Follies, and I thought it was wonderful. I thought Keith Carradine was so
absolutely
charming, and I thought it was inventive, and it was Cy Coleman's beautiful music, which he would later sing, which was amazing. But at the end, Keith came forward and he talked to the audience, and I had never, he had talked the whole show. So I just thought, okay, this is just part of the show. But he kind of eased out of character. He took off his hat and lost his accent and started talking about this thing called Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. And I was really hit by it because I had someone very important to me in college who I just recently reconnected with, and he was a mentor in many ways. And I was very upset because I had just learned that he was HIV positive, and sort of heard through the grapevine that he didn't want me to find out because he was ashamed of it. So I grabbed my wallet and I threw every dollar that I had and change in the hats that they were holding. They weren't holding buckets. And that's when I called in, like the next, when I went back out on the road. But I remember that like it was yesterday. And it was a beautiful, very emotional moment for me. And I started volunteering in lots of ways. I had no idea that Broadway Cares would change my life as, in such an incredible way.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was the 80s, AIDS in the 80s was terrifying. As a gay man, as a friend, as a person in the theater community. I remember working at Six Flags over Texas in a show in their reviews. And we had learned that nearly all of the boys from the previous year's cast had died. And we were like, that's when it really struck me. And so it was always something that was very, we were all very afraid of. Very few people were talking about it, even in the gay community. It was kind of like you didn't want to say it because you didn't want people to think you might be tearing up. It was a really rough time. And I remember when I did Miss Saigon, and they kept saying Broadway Cares, Broadway Cares. And I came into the show in the first year, and everybody's running around, and I was like, what is this exactly? And they're like, it's Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. Like, oh, I got that. And what do we do? And so we would take our GI hats off and go out into the audience at the end of the show and collect. And I tried to collect every night. I lived in Brooklyn, so there were times, a train stops running, you have to go. But that company was remarkable in their efforts with Broadway Cares. Tom Viola was always coming by and saying hi to us in the lobby. We did a lot of the early benefits, like kids in the show would do cabarets. We did the Gypsy of the Year, the Easter Bonnet. I wrote the Gypsy of the Years once because I was like, I want to be involved. We wrote a skit with Robin Bird.
An infamous skit in the history
holding up a giant condom. I mean, it was
if anyone doesn't know who Robin Bird is, BYRD, look her up.
Yeah, be careful. Be careful if you're age appropriate.
Yes, yes, of course.
But it really opened my eyes, and so that's when I started becoming involved and being aware of Broadway Cares. And then my next show was Cats, and we would do photos in the lobby with, dressed as cats to raise money, and $50 a picture with a cat. So it was, it was a remarkable thing that was so needed in that day. And this is not our first pandemic in the gay community. This is our second. It's not talked about much, but it's really, we already understand what, what spreading germs can be in our community.
I hope you don't mind me just saying that, there's obviously a big difference between that time and now, but what, completely aside, COVID aside, what people don't realize is that HIV started out very much affecting the gay community. And then it became, we started realizing, this is affecting more people. Well, now it still has its mark on the gay community, but it's about a cross section of poverty and lack of access to healthcare. Because for someone who has a fantastic job and great health insurance, it's 2021 and you're doing great as long as you don't have side effects and you stick to your medications. But for the CDC put out numbers just a couple of years ago that 75% of Americans that are HIV positive are living at or below the poverty line, which means that it's the it's being spread amongst communities that have so many other challenges that just exacerbate ideas of trying to, stay safe and get the right medications. And it's racism is a big part of the overlap of poverty, racism, and health throughout the country is crazy. But
which is ironic because it's happening again right now.
Exactly. It's
not ironic.
It's not the exact same way that it's happening, but it's the same problem that if you are a white man with certain kinds of access, you are in a much better situation than if you are a person of color, or if you're or the overlap of people struggling with food insecurity and poverty. It's a different world that many are not aware of.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it's just unbelievable that here in the 21st century that we are still struggling with those very same issues. Yeah.
Well, you look at, supposedly we're getting it right in fighting this current pandemic, which I can't believe because we're a mess in America. But there are countries where they have virtually 0% vaccinated. I mean, it's hard to even believe, and thank goodness, now we're starting to spend money to help those countries, as all, wealthy countries should. But it's poverty and racism. Sorry to get so serious. That's what these issues are about nowadays. Not that it doesn't affect, other communities, but it's a significant factor, and why there are different perceptions of what the experience of COVID or HIV/AIDS or.
And I will say also, from someone who is from South Carolina originally, the perceptions are very different outside of New York and California.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Well, if you ask the average American, what's the story with AIDS? Oh, AIDS, isn't that cured? They'll literally say that. Or
didn't our say that there was a cure for AIDS?
Let's say that again.
I said, didn't our former president say that there was a cure for AIDS?
Exactly. Yeah. Just like, there are many people right now saying that it's not important to be safe in terms of the current pandemic, or to get vaccinated. They think they're going to get a microchip in their neck.
It's interesting, because I first started hearing about COVID a couple of weeks before everything shut down. One of my very best friends, her sister lives in Italy, and she was telling me these horrific things that were happening there that were not even being covered in the news here on the level that I feel that it should have been. But as soon as I heard about it, I sent an email to all of the cabaret rooms in New York, begging them to shut their doors until we had a better grasp of what was going on. And a lot of that came because I lived through the 80s, and I remember what was going on. And I think that for those of us who were there, we know, but there are many that did not live through that on the level that we did in the theater in New York. And they may think that it's something that's out there that they're not dealing with. I want to get back to Broadway Backwards for a moment. I want to go back to the genesis of how it started, that light bulb that went off, and how it began to create a life of its own 16, 17 years ago.
Well, Danny was working at the center, and I had always said to him, I don't understand why gay people are such a part of musical theater. We are the actors, we are the writers, we're the choreographers, we're the designers, we're the audience for it, we are the fan base for it, and why there isn't more of a relationship between the Broadway community and the gay community. It just seems like a no-brainer. And I said, what can we do? What can we do? And actually, you can actually, maybe with your knowledge, Richard, help me with this, because we said, let's do something at the center that is uniquely LGBT. And at first I thought, well, why don't we do an all-male version, don't laugh, of Hello Dolly. And all male. And I thought, that could be really interesting. And I know that Fire Island used to do all male versions of musicals. I know they did Anything Goes, but I never knew. Do you know, did they do Hello, Dolly?
They did Hello, Dolly a few years ago. Yes.
Like
later in the run. Yes.
Like in the last decade, maybe?
Yes. I don't know if it's all male, to be honest with you. I think there were women in the chorus as well, but I think that Dolly was a male.
We thought about that, and we thought our first response after discussing was like, we'll never get the rights to it. They'll never be allowed.
You both know Louis Villabon. Yes, he choreographed that production, so we need to check in with him and find out.
I'd love to know, because that was we got off of that idea very quickly because we just didn't think it was achievable. And then we said, well, why don't we open up to the canon of all musical theater and have men do the women's parts and women do the men's parts? We had an eye on LGBT, but it wasn't as focused as.
Keep interrupting, but I want to ask you, when you were thinking along those lines, were you thinking that the men would be in drag, or they would just be playing the character without being in drag?
Never in drag, and that was kind of a rule of Backwards. We love drag. There's nothing wrong with drag, but what my perception of it was, I always felt I'm kind of a middle of the road gay, and I was like, where is my representation? Where am I? Like, I always liken it to Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd. People go to a movie and they're and as a gay man, I'm going, I want to kiss Paul Rudd. I got to imagine I'm Jennifer Aniston. Where is the person that I want to see kiss Paul Rudd? Where is that? It's not in the equation yet. Gay storylines were always drag, lacage, or the person, on an IV drip in a hospital bed, or the villain, in a Disney film. So I wanted to see some normalcy. Not that we don't celebrate all the colors of our community, we should, but I wanted to see some normalcy. So we just started. I begged, borrowed, and stole every friend I could. Harvey Evans, Andrea Burns, people I'd worked with. We just said, can you just come do this at the center? And so we did the show. Danny and I stayed up till hours going through material for the arts and hanging tin can lights and rolling out carpet and red carpet and we got trying to do a thing. And we thought we'd get like 30 people, and we got like hundreds of people lined up. Including Donna McKechnie. I don't know. I remember she was on the line, and it was July. It was a hot day. And I was like, Miss McKechnie, please come inside. It's too hot for you to stand in this line. And I sat her in a chair. But something magical happened when we did the number, We Kiss in the Shadow, with Cheyenne Jackson and Matt Kavanaugh. And the lyric took on a new meaning where you listened to a song you've heard a million times in a new way. And you went, oh, that is like they're telling the story of two possible leading men on Broadway that can't come out because of their careers and want to be together, and they're kissing in a shadow. And it was very moving. And when the show ended and we all talked, we said, that's really what Backwards is about. It's not a camp event. It's never been a camp event. And I'm from the Charles Busch school of, he once said to me brilliantly, you don't play camp, you play truth. And then you allow, and it's very funny. And there are moments that we play very truthfully that are very funny, but we never camp. And so as the years progressed, we went further into that storyline of LGBT stories. And that's really the hard, fast rule of Backwards. Sometimes we'll do a duet where one person is singing what was originally intended and the other person is reversed because it's a lesbian couple or a gay couple. And that's okay, but it has to tell a gay storyline. Like, we wouldn't do Don't Cry for Me, Argentina with a man, because there's nothing, unless some guy is going to maybe a fabulous cocktail party looking great, maybe we'll do that, but there has to be a purpose to it.
And unless there's some guy named Argentina.
Exactly.
We look for those. We look for those.
But I want to go back to that first time that you did this. Obviously, you were creating something that had not been done before. Was it easy to get people to jump on board, or was there some trepidation with people saying, I don't know if because there was a time, if you look back over the last 17 years, the changes that have been made in this business. I remember doing a show off Broadway in 1990 when there were publications that were coming out that wanted to out closeted actors. And what people don't understand, for me, the coming out process is a personal issue. And we don't know what demons or angels too, that are in people's closets that cause them to choose to come out or not to come out at the time that they do. We don't want them to be hypocritical in terms of the way they treat people from our community, but the coming out process is a very personal one. Was it easy to get the actors to commit at that time?
Well, first, before we answer that, I want to say that is a perfect description, I think, of coming out, what you just said, Richard, because I think you don't walk in anyone's shoes. You don't know what they're dealing with in their lives, what their family situation is, whatever. As long as it's not hypocritical, they have their journey. But I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, it's coming out. Coming out is all about what Broadway Backwards is about. I think it was probably like 3 years in where we sort of like that first year let us sort of informed what the event was when Matt and Cheyenne, especially when they sang that. I remember at the end of the song, they finished the song, and Bob had worked with the music director on a really sweet arrangement where it got very sparse at the end. And to be loved by you. And they moved closer and closer together so that as they just finished the last line, there was no more music and they touched lips. And there was a moment in the audience where like a couple of giggles, like one really loud gasp, and like a couple of people said things. Oh my gosh. And like, it sounds crazy that in 2021 that would have been the reaction. But after such an intimate number, that happened, and there were so many different responses, that told us what this event was. And to get back to your question, no, we didn't have any problem getting people to say yes. We definitely had to explain for many years what this was. There was one.
Can I use my friend? No, I'm using my friend, Mr.
Okay.
He won't care. Mr. Cariou, Len Cariou. The first year, he's like, well, am I an address? I said,
He had already said yes.
He said, yes, I'm doing it. He said, am I a dress? Like, he was willing to go and put on a dress for us, man.
He was willing to go as far as you needed him to go.
He's a glorious man. But we're like, no, you're not in a dress. But echoing off of him, this isn't the first time this has been done. This has been done. In fact, when I was in Miss Saigon, the cast of Miss Saigon put together a series of CDs called Stages, which was men singing love songs. And I don't know if you remember that. And
The black and white cover.
I was dating someone that actually did the picture for it. I never dated anyone before you, but you know. So we and historically, you know, Streisand has sung men's songs, and Judy Garland, you know, it's gone all over the map. Shakespeare,
but it didn't mean something.
But this,
when Ella sang a woman's song without changing the gender, she was just, I'm singing a pop song.
And what we've tried to do really with Backwards is focus it to our storylines. And I think, and this was before it was with Broadway Cares. It was just at the center, representing the center. I think people are very willing, like I said, in this community, to help and to support each other. And even in a no glory situation, like basically the cafeteria of the center, the little meeting room in the gym, to get on a razor and belt your brains out, that speaks volumes to what our community will do.
I'll also be honest. There have been times where performers have not participated, and it sort of, you could sense that there was a little discomfort. career wise.
More the traditional,
You know,
like
yeah.
Their journey is in a different place, and they've come up in a different way in this business that is not the way it is now.
I mean, there's lots of stuff. I mean, there's some gay performers who have not wanted to do something comedic. They want to do something very serious because they don't want to enter into the world of flamboyance. There have been straight performers who we've really carefully picked their song with them so that they feel comfortable. And then there's also like the surprises. Like, I'll never forget Wayne Brady. We had asked him to do it. And I didn't know Wayne Brady at all. I don't even remember how we got to him, but he was
in Kinky Boots, wasn't he?
Nope, that was the second time. He was in, you're right. He was in Kinky Boots, whatever. So maybe I asked the stage manager to ask him. But anyway, I remember talking to him on the phone and him going, tell me what this event is, and explaining a couple times. He's like, oh, now I get it. And he starts throwing out song after song. Brian Stokes Mitchell was the same way. And like suddenly every song that Brian Stokes Mitchell put out there had man in the title, or I love him, you know what it's like, and he wound up singing The Man I Love so beautifully.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
And that's always like really cool too, like when somebody gets it that isn't a part of the LGBT community and they're like, I'm really in for it, and they're coming up with, you know, there are a couple, you know, and then there's other people like, you know, Stephanie Block, who I will always refer to as the one who will pick the hardest song. She'll just say, give me 10 choices. Just give me 10 choices. And like, I'll send them to her and she'll literally respond. She's like, well, I like that a lot. And that's really fun. And that's funny. And I sort of know that song, but that one I don't know. And that terrifies me. So I'm going to pick that one. And she does it every time she's ever done Backwards. She's done Finishing the Hat from Sunday in the Park with George. You know, she did Our Time, but she led up this crazy arrangement of Our Time that Mary Mitchell Campbell created, the finale with an ensemble of 25 people behind her. But she said, I know every Sondheim show, but I don't know Merrily We Roll Along. So obviously I'm doing that song. And anyway, I've gone down a path.
No,
we're going
to run out of time in a few minutes, and it's killing me because I've got so many questions I want to ask you. I hope the two of you will come back sometime, either together, you know. I want to go back before we run out of time to last year. Everything was ready to go. We were excited. We got our tickets, as I said at the beginning of the show. When you got word that it would not be going on.
Yeah,
we were afraid that was coming our way as things were progressing. Yeah. We were 3 days away from
Thursday night.
The night
Thursday night, and we were doing it on a Monday.
Yeah. For our run through of the whole show.
Before you go there, I called Russ Willie, and I said, Russ, as you know, favorite night of the year to go. I am feeling so nervous about going to the theater.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not giving away your ticket until they tell us what's going on. And he's a sweetheart. And,
I love Russ Willie.
Oh, I do too. And but he waited, and then we got word that it was not going to happen. He was not.
Do you want to hear how it happened? So I had a conversation with your friend Leslie Ann Warren. Just a few days earlier, and she said, I have some bad news. I don't feel comfortable flying in. Yeah. And when you're involved in a show, you don't watch the news. All you do is you live and breathe 24 hours a day. And I had sort of been aware, but I wasn't paying attention to it. And that really hit me hard. And I was thinking about it. And Bob said to me probably twice over, that week, do you think we're going to be able to do it? Please don't tell me we're going to cancel it. Please don't tell me we're going to cancel it. And I really thought about that conversation with Leslie. At first I was like, oh, darn it. Oh my God. You're an icon. My gosh.
I had that
conversation. I started to think
before you did.
But then I thought about what it meant for her to step on an airplane, not knowing enough about this virus yet. And 2 days later, I think it was like 2 or 3 days later, I called Tom. I ducked into the other room so he wouldn't hear me. And I said, listen, Tom Biola. I said, listen, I suspect this is on all of your minds, and I think that I have to be the one to cancel Broadway Backwards, as much as it's going to kill me, him, 100 volunteers. And he said, well, yeah, I've been struggling with this. And I said, I think, why don't we all meet first thing tomorrow? I'm not going to tell Bob, because then he's just going to have a whole night of terror and sweats and all sorts of stuff about like, how's he going to break everybody's heart and stuff. So I didn't tell him. And then you went into rehearsal the next day.
We were rehearsing. He plays the violin.
Oh,
set in an all boys school orchestra class with a love story.
Where the gay kid, who was played by Garrett Clayton, who's a big Disney star and television musicals, and also
had flown in from LA actor to do
and
this,
singer, and he's in love with the straight guy in the class who plays the violin, and it was just
it's a beautiful number.
Amazing.
And we were in the middle of, we just run it, and we were like, Danny, you got to see this number. And then he's like, everybody come here.
You know, I said, why don't we take a break? And I talked to just the creative.
And then he started crying, and then he announced it to the company, and everybody started crying, and then everybody started hugging. And I was like, no hugs, go home, no hugs. And it was very hard.
You know, Garrett had flown. We had a bunch of people who had flown in from out of town, and
we were already in rehearsal, social distancing. We were saying, don't be together until you have to be on stage.
Everyone was washing, cleaning, no kissing,
and, washing our hands constantly and sanitizing.
We even had people cleaning the door handles every 10 minutes.
Yeah, like, we were already doing that.
Although we did discover one person came into rehearsal with COVID, but we didn't get it from him.
Yeah,
right. A friend stopped by.
Well, we don't know when he developed it.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, yeah. So we had to, and then so we announced to the cast. We then sent a note to the company, then let all of our sponsors and ticket buyers and everybody. But it was hard, and it was going to be probably it had a lot of courageous numbers in it.
Well, I'm going to say this: when you come back, you're going to have a coming out party like none you've ever had before. I see it coming back bigger and brighter and better than ever. We are out of time. I want to respect your time as well as everyone who's tuning in right now. So I try not to go too far over an hour. And I could very easily do that, especially with you guys. I love you both so much. I don't know if you know that. I really admire what you have done, what you've created. And talk to Russ. He'll let you know what I feel about this evening. I wanted to show a few clips today. I'm now glad that we didn't, because it gave us more time to talk. But they are available on YouTube. Everyone, if you're not familiar with what they're doing, please go and check these out. They're incredible, great clips. Big spender. I can't get enough of it.
With the original Bob Fosse choreography.
Yes, and and this, year you went virtual. Phenomenal presentation. It should have been on national television for the world to see. Truly. So I can't wait for you to come back. I want to thank everybody for being here today. If you enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, there are a couple of things I'd like you to do. Please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Hit the like button if you liked today's show. Leave a comment. And for God's sake, please, please, please make a contribution to Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. They do phenomenal work, and we're all in this together. As my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. So you never know what someone else is going through. And then another friend of mine said, but if you're going to be in a boat, make sure you've got a skipper joining you. So, and I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the second name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email, not a text message, not a private message, but a phone call. You never know what someone else is going through. And let's just all reach out together. We are a community, not just the Broadway community, but beyond. It's the people that you come in contact with on a daily basis and the people that you don't. We're all emerging now again. Please be safe. Do whatever you can. I'm going to leave the screen for both of you. And I want each of you to have the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to anyone about anything that's on your mind. I love you guys. You're always worth celebrating. Thank you.
Thank
We
you,
love
Richard.
you too. Thank you.
The thing I want to say is dovetailing off of what you just said, Richard, is this year's Backwards was about isolation. And that is one of the biggest things that's happening in our nation. There are people in the gay community, especially, but in all communities, that are isolated and feeling very alone. There are kids that can't come out or have come out and have been thrown out of their homes. There are people suffering all over. So as Richard said, the end of this year's Backwards, silence is the most powerful scream is the title card of the show. And the last words in it is reach out. So as Richard said, do reach out to each other and help each other, because that's all we got. That's all we got.
Yeah, I'll just add, Richard said that he talked about the Broadway community. And I have to say, I think that the Broadway community is not just the people on stage and backstage. It's people that care and people that love the theater. It's people in the audience, and thank goodness, people that are compassionate and will reach out.
And who doesn't love singing a good show tune at home?
Oh, my Lord. Have a good one. Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.